Look, most of us know the story of how Malcolm X died, but the real story, the one we're going to unpack here, isn't just about the assassination. It's about the incredible, world-changing strategy he was building in his final year, a strategy that made him a global threat.
So let's start at the end. It's February 21st, 1965, at the Audubon Ballroom in Washington Heights. There are about 400 people there waiting to hear him speak. But that speech, it's never going to be finished. This is the end point, the violent conclusion to an absolutely remarkable year.
Right, so the assassination itself is a fact. But the real question, the one that truly matters, isn't just who pulled the trigger. It's why. What on earth did Malcolm X do in his last year that made him so dangerous that so many powerful people wanted him gone? The answer is in this brilliant strategic pivot he made. See, after his famous split from the Nation of Islam in early 1964, Malcolm didn't just tweak his message. No, he completely changed the entire battlefield. He decided to take the struggle for Black liberation and elevate it from a domestic problem to a full-blown international crisis.
And this right here is the absolute key to understanding everything. The difference between civil rights and human rights was his masterstroke. Think about it. A civil rights fight keeps the problem inside America's borders. You're basically asking Uncle Sam to police himself. But a human rights struggle? Whoa. That takes the whole case to the world stage. It puts Uncle Sam himself on trial in front of the entire planet.
And here it is, in his own words from that fiery ballot or the bullet speech. He laid it out plain and simple. He wasn't just looking for sympathy anymore. He was looking to put the United States on trial, with the newly independent nations of Africa and Asia serving as the jury. And, this wasn't just talk. He had a concrete plan. He created a new political group, the Organization of African American Unity, specifically for this purpose. The goal was to take this human rights charge straight to the United Nations and force a global hearing on America's race problem. So, why was this move so terrifying to the U.S. government? Well, because it struck at their single biggest vulnerability at the time, their image on the world stage, right in the middle of the Cold War. You got to remember the context. The U.S. and the Soviet Union are in this huge global wrestling match for the loyalty of all these new countries in Africa and Asia. America's whole brand was being the leader of the free world, and its blatant racism was, frankly, a huge liability. It was their Achilles heel, and Malcolm X was aiming an arrow right at it. He was so smart about this. He stopped just talking about Mississippi and started connecting the dots between Selma and the anti-colonial movements in places like the Congo. He was framing it all as one big global fight against imperialism. For the U.S. State Department, this was a public relations catastrophe in the making. And oh, you better believe Washington was paying attention. Suddenly, Malcolm X wasn't just some street corner orator. He was on the radar of the whole alphabet soup of agencies: the FBI, the CIA, the State Department, even the NYPD's Special Intelligence Unit. They were all watching him, infiltrating his groups, and trying to shut him down. And just to give you an idea of how seriously they took this, the FBI's file on him was over 40,000 pages long. 40,000 pages. That's not just keeping tabs on someone, that's treating him like a major threat to national security. So with all these eyes on him, you'd think he might back down, right? Nope. Through 1964, he slammed his foot on the accelerator, taking his case to the world and basically daring the U.S. government to stop him. I mean, look at this timeline. The man was on a mission. He spends 18 weeks abroad, meeting with presidents. In Cairo, he literally presents a memo to African leaders formally indicting the United States. Then he's at the super prestigious Oxford Union, winning over a huge international audience. By the time France physically bars him from entering the country just weeks before his death, it was obvious that U.S. diplomatic pressure was working overtime to silence him. And that's the bottom line. He had actually done it. He had successfully internationalized the struggle. In the minds of people like J. Edgar Hoover at the FBI, Malcolm X had crossed a critical line. He wasn't a domestic problem anymore. He was a geopolitical threat. And all of that, it brings us right back to where we started, to that final frantic week of his life. With threats coming at him from every direction, the countdown had already begun. Get this. Just 7 days before the assassination, his house is firebombed while he and his family are asleep inside. Because of the constant threats, he couldn't even get insurance for the place. He later told a reporter he stood outside in his bare feet in 15-degree weather with a rifle just waiting for 45 minutes for the police to show up. He knew he was a marked man. That fatal decision to tell his security team not to search people at the door of the Audubon, it let his killers walk right in. The attack itself was just savage. The medical examiner found 21 different gunshot wounds in his body. This wasn't meant to be a warning. It was a brutal public execution. And this, for me, is the most mind-blowing part of the whole story, the paradox of that day. Despite all the known threats, there wasn't a single uniformed cop outside the building. Not one. And yet, inside, the room was crawling with at least 9 undercover officers and FBI informants. Even one of his main security guys was secretly an undercover cop. Think about that. The people assigned to watch him were everywhere. The people who could have protected him were nowhere to be seen. So, when you put all the pieces together, you're left with a really chilling conclusion. The reason he was killed was so much bigger than just an internal feud. He was silenced because his global strategy was actually working. By putting America's human rights record on trial before the entire world, he was creating a crisis that the powers that be simply could not afford to let happen. He wasn't just an activist anymore. He was becoming a world leader. And for that, he was eliminated. Which leaves us with this huge, lingering question. What if? What if he had lived? What if he had actually succeeded in bringing the United States before the UN in 1965? How might that have changed the course of the civil rights movement, the Cold War, and maybe even the world we live in today? It's a powerful legacy, and a story that was tragically left unfinished.